He opened the car door at 60 miles per hour. Not by accident. He looked at her, reached across her body, and opened it. Then he pushed her out. She hit the asphalt of I-94 at speed, hip first, then shoulder, her tablet shattering against the guardrail, her purse splitting open, one heel snapping clean off. Cooper Wyatt merged back into traffic without touching his brakes. He had driven exactly 4 miles when he ran out of road. Because the man in the black Rolls Royce idling on that same shoulder, the man who had watched the whole thing happen, had already made one phone call. And Kwan Lee did not make phone calls twice. This is the story of what happened on the 94 that evening. And why Cooper Wyatt is currently in federal prison. It started with a lie about a dying grandmother. It was 4:47 on a Tuesday when Ethel Moran's phone lit up. 7 minutes before the biggest presentation of her career. Months of work sitting open on her laptop, waiting. Cooper Wyatt. She almost didn't answer. There had been a version of Ethel forming slowly over the past few months, a version who had started sleeping on the far edge of the bed, who flinched at the sound of his car in the driveway, who had begun, quietly, to understand that the life she was living was not the life she had agreed to. That version would have let it ring. But she wasn't fully her yet. So she picked up. Ethel. It's your grandmother. Nana Ruth. The nursing home just called. She had a stroke. They're saying she's unresponsive. Her world stopped. Nana Ruth. The woman who raised her after her mother left. The woman who still called her Birdie. 81 years old, soft hands, the smell of lavender talc. Which hospital? St. Catherine's. Off the 94. Don't take a cab, I'm already outside. There's no time. There's no time. She left her keys on her keyboard. Left her presentation open. Left her coffee, still hot. And she ran. He was at the curb exactly where he said he'd be. Silver sedan, engine running. He didn't get out. Didn't come around. Just pushed the passenger door open from the inside, the way you do for someone who owes you the courtesy of getting in quickly. She got in. Pulled the door shut. Cooper accelerated before her seatbelt clicked. She watched the exit signs blur past. Roosevelt. Harrison. And then the on-ramp to I-94 West. Which was not the direction of St. Catherine's. Cooper. The hospital is east. He said nothing. He just drove. 2 miles of silence. Her hand moved slowly toward the door handle, then stopped. They were on the highway. 65 miles per hour. Her mind was doing the calculation it does when it finally understands that the danger is not somewhere ahead of you. It is in the seat beside you. You really thought I wouldn't find out, he said. Not a question. His voice had changed, the softness replaced by something flat and deliberate. Like a blade being drawn. Yanelle from your office told her husband. Her husband plays basketball with my guy Terrence. Terrence told me. You've been talking to a lawyer, Ethel. I want to go to the hospital. There is no hospital. He said it the way someone says it's raining. Plain. Final. Nana Ruth is fine. I called the front desk an hour ago to confirm. She was eating dinner and watching Jeopardy. Let that land. He had called the nursing home. Confirmed her grandmother was safe. And then he had used her grandmother's name, the name of the person she loved most in the world, as a key. Not to open something. To lock her inside. The speedometer climbed. 70. 75. You've been building your little exit strategy, he continued. I know about the box in your closet. The folder with all the receipts. You think you can just walk away from me after 3 years? You think someone else is going to stop the car? He didn't stop the car. He accelerated. She heard her door swing open before she understood what was happening. The wind hit her like a wall. His hand closed around her upper arm, not explosive. Practiced. The certainty of someone who had already decided what happened next. The asphalt. Gray, fast, infinite. Her body separating from the seat. The sky tilting. And then the impact. The shoulder of I-94 caught her between 55 and 60 miles per hour. Left hip first. Shoulder. Her tablet skidded away and shattered against the guardrail. Her purse split open. One heel snapped clean off. She lay still. 3 seconds. Maybe 5. Cars swerved around her with the abstract efficiency of people who did not want to be involved. 1 horn. Then 2. Then the white noise of moving traffic. Cooper's car was already gone. No brake lights. No slowing. The silver sedan merged into the middle lane and disappeared into the blur of the 94 as if she had simply ceased to exist the moment she left his passenger seat. Ethel pushed herself upright. Palms torn open. Teal silk blouse ripped at the shoulder. She pressed her back against the guardrail and tried to breathe. No one stopped. No one ever stops. She reached for her phone, screen cracked, but still lit, and she was deciding between 911 and her cousin Miriam when she heard it. From somewhere ahead on the shoulder. An engine. Low. Unhurried. The kind of quiet that cost money. The kind that didn't roar, but decided. The black Rolls Royce eased onto the shoulder 30 feet ahead of her. Hazard lights pulsing amber. Slow. Deliberate. Like a heartbeat that wasn't rushing for anyone. The driver's door opened. He was not what she expected. A man in a three-piece black suit. White shirt. Black tie. Standing on the shoulder of I-94 with 18-wheelers screaming past at 70 miles per hour, pressing the fabric of his jacket flat against his chest. He showed no awareness of the absurdity of this. He adjusted his cufflinks. Adjusted. His cufflinks. On the shoulder of an interstate. As if the highway were a minor inconvenience and he had simply stepped outside for air. He walked toward her. Slowly. Shoes polished to a depth that seemed impractical for a highway. The tattoo climbing the right side of his neck was intricate and dark, disappearing beneath his collar. His face was composed in a way that had nothing to do with coldness. It was the composure of someone who had long since run out of things to fear. He stopped 3 feet from her. And crouched down to her level. Not quickly. Not with the stiff overcare of someone trying to appear approachable. He simply lowered himself until his eyes were level with hers, forearms on his knees, expression carrying the stillness of a man in no hurry because he had already decided how this ended. "You're bleeding," he said. His English was precise, slightly formal, the structure of someone who learned the language from books before he learned it from rooms. "I'm fine," Ethel said. Which was not true. But which was the sentence her body had been trained to produce in moments like these. He didn't argue with her. He reached into his breast pocket and produced a folded cloth, white, pressed, the kind no one actually carries anymore, and held it out. "For your hand." The silver sedan, he drove away west. "You saw it." "I saw enough." Behind him, a second black vehicle had pulled off the highway a quarter-mile ahead. A dark SUV. Positioned deliberately. Like a piece moved on a board. "My name is Kwan Lee," he said. Not the way people say their name when they want to be impressive. The way you give someone information they will eventually need. "Can you stand?" Ethel looked at him. At the cloth in his hand, impossibly white against the grey of the highway. At the Rolls behind him, engine still running. At the SUV ahead, which had not moved, but whose presence had begun, quietly, to rearrange the shape of what she thought was possible. She took the cloth. Pressed it to her palm. "Yes," she said. "I can stand." He extended one hand, palm up, and waited. With the patience of someone who understood that offering a hand to a woman just thrown from a car was not a gesture to be rushed. She looked at it for 2 full seconds. Then she placed her torn, blooded hand in his. Kwan Lee stood. And brought her up with him. 50 feet ahead, his associate lifted a phone to his ear. Cooper Wyatt had exactly 4 miles left. She was still steadying herself when she heard the sound ahead. Not an accident. Not chaos. Coordinated. A second black SUV had positioned itself across the exit ramp 1 mile west. Cooper's only way off this highway. And the first SUV was behind him, closing distance with the calm, unhurried purpose of something that had already won. The silver sedan had nowhere to go. She watched from the shoulder, Kwan Lee standing beside her, not watching the scene ahead but watching her, making sure she was upright, as Cooper's car decelerated. Brake lights. Then a full stop on the shoulder. 2 of Kwan Lee's associates stepped out. They did not rush. They did not shout. They simply stood at each end of the silver sedan the way walls stand, present, immovable, requiring no further explanation. Then the police cruisers arrived. 2 of them. Blue and red cutting through the amber evening. Kwan Lee's people stepped back, creating space, making room. As if they had always planned to hand this off. As if they had simply been holding something in place until the proper authorities arrived to take it. Cooper Wyatt stepped out of his car with his hands raised. His face, even from this distance, was the face of a man who had just understood, fully, finally, that confidence had been the most dangerous thing he owned. She watched the handcuffs go on. Kwan Lee said nothing. He simply turned from the scene ahead and looked at her. There is a car waiting at the next exit. I would like to take you somewhere safe, if you'll allow it. Ethel looked at the handcuffs on her ex-fiancée's wrists. At the broken glass from her tablet still scattered across the shoulder. At the heel of her shoe, 20 feet away, lying on its side in a crack in the concrete. Okay, she said. The apartment was on the 14th floor in the West Loop. No signage on the building. 2 key fobs to reach the floor. Clean. Spare. Curated by someone who valued function. Clothes had been laid across the foot of the bed. Dark trousers. A soft white shirt. Cotton socks. Her size, approximately. She didn't ask how. When she came out of the bedroom, he was in the kitchen. Jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, the first informality she'd seen from him. Making tea with the economical movements of someone who had always made his own. The tattoo she'd glimpsed on his neck continued down his right forearm in a dense geometric pattern that ended just below his wrist. He set both cups on the table without asking what she took. You should eat, he said. There's food in the refrigerator. You had it prepared this afternoon, she said slowly, before you knew I existed. Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. Acknowledging the absurdity without surrendering to it. This apartment is always prepared. It is not specific to you. He sat across from her. But you are welcome to it for as long as you need. She looked at him over the rim of her cup. Who are you, Mr. Lee? Not your name. I have your name. Who are you, and why did you stop? He was quiet for a moment. The way of someone selecting from among several truthful answers. I was born in Incheon. I came to this country at 17 with nothing that was mine. By the time I was 25, I had built something. By 30, what I had built required a particular kind of management. I have spent the last 12 years managing it. He set down his cup. On the 94 this evening, I saw a woman on the shoulder of a road who had been put there by a man who felt entitled to put her there. I have known men like that. I have also known what happens when no one stops. And Cooper? She asked. He reached into his jacket, hung over the back of his chair, and placed a folded envelope on the table between them. Cooper Wyatt has been operating a wire fraud and money laundering network out of a Delaware-registered logistics company for 4 years. He moves approximately $2 million quarterly through shell invoices for freight services that do not exist. He nodded toward the envelope. The FBI field office in Chicago received an anonymous package this morning containing account records, wire transfer logs, and email correspondence going back to 2021. Ethel stared at the envelope. This morning. Before you knew me. Before I knew you, he confirmed. I knew Cooper Wyatt. His financial operation intersected with a port contact of mine in a way that required my attention. The package to the FBI was the conclusion of a 14-month process that had nothing to do with you. A pause. Until it had everything to do with you. She sat with this. Cooper had not simply been violent. He had been, simultaneously, in parallel, a criminal. The control. The isolation. The way he monitored her, tracked her schedule, kept her in perpetual low-grade exhaustion. She had thought it was possessiveness. She understood now it was also risk management. He had needed her contained not only because he was abusive, but because she was an accountant. And accountants notice things. The folder, she said quietly. In my closet. The receipts he mentioned in the car. Kwan Lee looked at her steadily. What was in it? Bank statements. His. Mostly. Things that came to the apartment that he never opened around me. I kept them because I had a feeling, for a long time, that I would eventually need to be able to show someone what I had seen. I didn't know what I was looking at. But I knew it mattered. Something settled in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. I would like to see that folder, he said. If you are willing. She nodded. Then, because she was Ethel Moran, and because the particular clarity that comes from surviving something does not cancel out the part of you that needs to understand the full shape of things, she asked the question she had been circling since the highway. What do you want in return for all of this? Kwan Lee was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, nothing that you are not willing to give. She looked at him. At the tattoo. At the rolled sleeves. At the composed, unhurried face of a man who had arranged, in the same morning, the financial destruction of her abuser, and a safe room with her correct clothing size and 2 cups of tea at precisely the right temperature. For the first time since 4:47 that afternoon, the ground beneath her felt solid. The sentencing was on a Thursday in October, 8 months after the night on the 94. Ethel sat in the 3rd row behind the prosecution table. Charcoal blazer. Her grandmother's pearl earrings, which Nana Ruth had pressed into her palm the Sunday before and said, without further explanation, "Wear these. So he knows you came dressed." She had come dressed. The charges took 4 minutes to read aloud. Wire fraud. Money laundering. Interstate transport in furtherance of a violent crime. The push from the car, captured by a highway traffic camera and supplemented by the sworn testimony of 2 of Kwan Lee's associates, neither of whom had been required to disclose their employer. Obstruction. 3 of Cooper's business partners had cooperated with the U.S. Attorney's Office, thoroughly, enthusiastically, the way people cooperate when they realize the person they've been protecting was never protecting them. Cooper entered from the side door in a gray suit that didn't fit the way his clothes used to. He had lost weight. The jaw that had always been set at an angle of total certainty was softer now, not broken, not humble, but diminished. The particular diminishment of men who have spent months in rooms where confidence is not currency. He looked at her once. She gave him nothing. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with the contained authority of someone who stopped being impressed by spectacle 20 years ago, read the sentence without theater. 11 years, federal. Minimum 8 before parole eligibility. Forfeiture of all assets connected to the fraud network, which, between the shell companies and the port accounts and the Delaware registrations and the contents of the folder Ethel had retrieved from her closet and handed to the U.S. Attorney 6 days after the highway, amounted to something in the neighborhood of $4 million. Cooper's attorney said something in a low voice. Cooper said nothing. Ethel watched the bailiff cross the room. Watched the handcuffs go back on. Watched Cooper Wyatt, who had used her grandmother's name like a weapon, who had opened a car door on a highway at 60 miles an hour with absolute confidence that the world would adjust itself around his choices, be walked out through a door that closed behind him with the plain, bureaucratic finality of a thing decided. She exhaled. She hadn't known, until that moment, how long she had been holding her breath. Miriam was on the courthouse steps in a yellow coat, holding 2 coffees, crying in the performative way she cried at the end of good movies. Okay, but 11 years, Birdie. 11. Ethel laughed. A real one. The kind that comes from somewhere below the ribcage. The kind not performed for anyone. They stood on the courthouse steps and drank bad coffee in the October cold. Miriam talked for 15 minutes without pausing, which was her way of expressing love. Ethel had gone back to work 3 weeks after the highway. Her colleagues hadn't known what to say, and so had said very little, which was the correct instinct. She had presented the Donovan account the following Tuesday. Cooper Wyatt had not been in the room when she built it. He had no standing in the room where it was delivered. The clients approved the proposal. She took herself to dinner afterward. Alone. At a restaurant with tablecloths. And ordered the expensive thing on the menu. Kwan Lee had called twice in the 8 months since the highway. Not to ask anything. Not to arrange anything. Once, to tell her the folder had been submitted and the U.S. Attorney considered it significant. Once, 2 months later, simply to ask if she was well. She said yes, which was becoming increasingly true. He said good, and meant it, and the call ended in under 4 minutes, because neither of them spoke past the point of meaning. She thought about calling him, now, standing on the courthouse steps. She would. Not today. Today belonged to the yellow coat and the bad coffee and the pearl earrings and the clean, uncomplicated fact of what the morning had produced. But she would. She thought about what it had felt like, on the shoulder of I-94, placing her torn hand in his palm, feeling the highway stop being a place where she had been abandoned and become, instead, a place where she had been found. 8 months later. On the steps of a federal courthouse. Coffee in hand. Verdict behind her. The most protected she had ever felt in her life had not been in a locked apartment on the 14th floor. Not in a courtroom with a federal ruling. It had been on the asphalt of I-94, at dusk, with her palm bleeding and her tablet in pieces and Cooper's car already gone, when a man in a 3-piece suit had stepped out of a Rolls Royce, crouched down to her level, and waited. No rushing. No pity. No making her smallness the point of the story. Just a hand, extended, palm up. and the patience to let her decide. She had been ready. She always had been. You want to know what Kwan Lee said to Cooper on that shoulder? The 4 sentences that made his chin come down? That story is next. Subscribe so you don't miss it.